Ever face the agony of betrayal by the one you vowed to spend your life with? I did. This is the last night I'm spending with her, I realized, during what should have been a celebration of my success. Instead, my world crumbled as I discovered her infidelity with a colleague. She could engage with the whole law firm for all I cared. Actually, I cared deeply. But infidelity was something I could not or would not stomach, I told myself. This revelation upended everything I believed in, plunging me into a deep hurt I refused to let consume me. This is my journey to redemption. Enjoy watching it. I stood up front and looked over the happy folks. It was the big yearly party at the law place when they tell us who the new big bosses and top dogs are. Over 100 people were there, all on their feet, making noise and clapping. After 20 years at Clinkerbeard, I had made it to top boss. The cheers from everyone blew me away. I always tried to be a good lawyer and leader, looking out for the less lucky, both in and out of work. This was the moment I had hoped for most of those 20 years, becoming a top boss. Looking over the bunch, my eyes landed on my wife of 25 years, who was right in front of me with tears in her eyes, standing by the oldest boss, Robert Fisher, and his wife, Sophia. Now, I had to give a short, fun talk and say thanks to everyone who helped me get here. I could start with my wife, who had started something with Robert 6 months back. I felt I earned my spot by myself, but my wife's choice to get close to him sure didn't make things worse. I lifted my hands trying to quiet the very loud crowd. I might have been the only one not drinking since they don't tell us the news until after we eat and drink. Lots of wine and the usual party stuff. The law place paid for the hotel rooms and rides home because it would look bad if any of us ended up in a Chicago jail for the night. After a bit, folks started to sit down at the big round tables waiting for my speech. I saw Robert now sitting nearer to Martha, his hand likely under the table, maybe touching her leg covered in nylon. I watched her get ready in our hotel room, putting on those dark stockings up her long legs and clipping them to her belt. She gave me a cheeky smile and left her underwear off, hinting at a wild night after the party. I tried to smile back, but felt sick inside. Just 2 days before, a detective had shown me proof in my office, though I wasn't shocked. In the hotel, I wondered why she was all set for a steamy time since it had been ages since we were close. Did she forget? Or was she too caught up with Robert to remember to spend time with me? Did she think I wouldn't see the lack of closeness and other signs she was seeing someone else? We once had a fun and busy love life. Then it just stopped 6 months back. Sure, as a busy lawyer and her being a top caterer in Chicago, we were both swamped, but we always made time before. She just turned 45 and looked stunning, tall and slim with perfect curves and lovely blonde hair. I was proud to have won her heart back in college. Shame I couldn't keep it. Sometimes good and bad things happen together. That thought could fit in my speech, I mused. But well, maybe she thought this was a pity moment, or a congrats on the promotion kind of night, or perhaps a goodbye kind of night. Or maybe she planned to sneak away with Robert during the party and then come back to me. At least we hadn't been close in months, sparing me from that mess. But who knows what she planned for tonight? Well, actually, I did. I knew this was our last night together. She could be with anyone for all I cared. But deep down, I cared a lot. But I couldn't deal with cheating, especially not with that smug guy, Robert Fisher. He wasn't much of a lawyer, but he knew how to play the game. He knew all the secrets in Chicago and Springfield, the big town's center. I could barely stand him, and Martha knew it. Why did she pick him of all people? I knew about her affair from the start, but kept it quiet. I gathered proof like a smart lawyer, planning my way out. Staying away from her probably made her affair easier, but being near her was too hard. I started coming home late and leaving early, hitting the gym hard. With a coach's help, I lost some weight and got even fitter. Not that Martha noticed, we barely saw each other. New suits and this new fit me added to my confidence in court. I didn't really need it. I was already known as a tough fighter. But feeling good and getting some looks didn't hurt. With my heart feeling empty, I felt even more driven. I wasn't just any lawyer. I took big cases but also helped people for free, earning a name for myself. I was proud of winning fights against big companies that did bad things to their workers. At first, Robert and the other big bosses were worried about my work. You see, I often took legal fights to their friends, But when I won a huge cash case, they started paying attention. My trusty assistant, who hears everything, got me a secret copy of their big meeting talk. They couldn't decide if they should make me a top partner. It was Robert Fisher who said if they didn't, I might leave for another firm. That made them think. I wondered why he said that. Was it because he wanted to stay close to Martha through me? Or maybe because he and Martha were more than just friends. It was a puzzle I might never solve. Our twin girls, Emily and Olivia, would be surprised to hear about me and Martha splitting up. They were at UCLA doing track and field, both tall and pretty like their mom and with height from us both. They were coming home for Christmas soon. Martha had our Lake Forest house all ready for Christmas and our big yearly bash. It was a big deal with all the top people from Chicago. I was actually glad to skip it. I didn't like the party or many of the guests, who were the kind of bad news that keeps our jails full. When things got a bit quieter, I adjusted the mic and said, "I'm sorry to cut in, but I'll keep it quick." There were some jokes and noise, but soon folks listened. For some reason, Robert seemed upset. Maybe because Martha hinted he was out of luck tonight. Martha wouldn't be with me either, so maybe Robert might end up lucky after all. I've been at this amazing firm my whole working life. When I became a partner, I was over the moon. All through the years here, I've made lots of friends. It was hard to see some leave, not just because I taught them so much, but because I knew they'd use my own tips against me. That got a soft laugh. Working here, helping the little guys of this town has been a great honor. That got a big clap. Martha had tears in her eyes. By the look she gave me, you'd think she really cared. Now I've been named the top partner. Everyone clapped more, with Martha grinning big. I need to thank everyone who helped me get this honor, including my dear wife, Martha. She spent many nights alone while I was out at courts and jails in Illinois. She grinned at that. I wondered if she thought about all those times I was alone while she was off with someone else. I also have to thank my work wife, Abigail, who deals with me even when I'm grumpy and always supports me. I nodded at Abigail, a pretty woman who's been with me for 10 years. She's also got 2 kids and a husband she's very loyal to. I felt jealous of the guy. Sitting close enough, I saw her turn red. Then she gave me a strange look. From that, I knew she knew about Martha and Robert Fisher, but she hadn't told me. How could she? It probably meant everyone at work knew I was being cheated on. My heart felt even more empty, but I kept on smiling as she got a round of applause. Long ago, when I was just starting, Mr. Schutz told me a simple tale about slaves rowing an old boat. The guy in charge had a whip. The speaker said to everyone, "I have good and bad news. The good thing is we all get more food today," making everyone happy. "But after we eat, the boss wants to go on a boat ride." That made everyone laugh as they knew they had hard work ahead. "Now I have to share something hard," the speaker continued, now having everyone's full attention. Martha looked worried, thinking her secret was out. But the speaker went on, "I found out I'm very sick." This news made everyone whisper and ask, "What did he say? If I don't get help now, it could end bad," he added. Martha felt many things. First, relief her secret was safe, then shock and worry she didn't know about his sickness, and anger that she was finding out with everyone else. But soon, she just looked very sad. "I'm sad I can't be here to watch all of you grow and succeed. I like to think I still have a lot to teach you," he said, looking at them. He then looked at Robert, who didn't show any emotion. Was he sad about losing a colleague or thinking about Martha? It didn't matter now. "Robert, I've left my job. I've given my work to others," he finished, setting the room into a thoughtful silence. Leaving the firm felt big to me, and I was thankful for the chances they gave me. I said my thanks and good luck to everyone. When I walked behind the stage curtains, the room went quiet. Soon, I found myself outside the hotel, walking under the snow that was covering everything. I turned and walked down a back alley to find my ride, away from any watching eyes. "Good night, Mr. Randall," a big man with a deep Russian voice said. He stood by a black car, holding an umbrella. I cleaned snow off my suit and got into the dark but warm car. "Good night, Oleg." We drove away, choosing streets with less watching cameras, and the thick snow helped hide us too. I was leaving, and I didn't want anyone to find me before I was ready. I took out my laptop to check my to-do list and see that my money was safe in hidden bank accounts. I left enough for Martha so she wouldn't be left with nothing. Her own business made her enough money anyway. I didn't share my last big work bonus with her. She hadn't been there for me as a wife should for a long time. I quickly emailed my divorce lawyer telling him to start. Tony Preston was an old friend and the best at this kind of work in the city. I didn't think Martha would fight the divorce, but it was good to have a strong lawyer just in case. I'd let him act for me in all things about my divorce because I didn't plan to stick around. I needed to get away to heal my broken heart, not from sickness, but from love lost. The woman I loved had let me down. Plus, I felt so tired. After 2 decades, the thought of stepping into a courtroom again was too much. The end of my marriage was a wake-up call. I wanted to call my daughters once Martha got the divorce papers. I guessed she'd call them first, and my call would be to explain why I wouldn't be home for the holidays. She was supposed to get the papers by Monday. At least, Martha would have our girls for Christmas. If all went as planned, I'd be far away, in a quiet place alone. Half an hour later, we stopped on a dark street near some big, plain buildings on the south side. A guy in jeans and a hoodie came out of a dark entrance and got in the car with me. Oleg stepped out to smoke and watch the area. It wasn't a safe place, and being careful, even in a snowstorm, was wise. The guy with me was Rodney Spencer, a top-notch hacker and a former client. He looked young, but was 23. I had helped him and his family out of trouble before, so I asked for a favor. He didn't talk until he gave me a beat-up canvas bag. "Here's everything you'll need," he said, almost smiling in the dim light. I fumbled with the bag's zipper in the dark and pulled out a cell phone, a tablet, and a laptop. "Here's the deal," he began. "The cell is just like your iPhone and the laptop, like your MacBook. But I changed them a bit. The location tracker on them shifts each time you use them. If you try to call now, it'll look like you're in Vancouver, BC. Better wait till tomorrow." He chuckled. "This laptop can send emails from all over. You can even use Skype. I bet not even the NSA could track you, maybe." "The iPad's a free extra. Got it for the same reason," he said. "Oh, and that other thing? You'll find all about Fisher in a folder named Tsunami." "And?" I asked. He laughed. "Easy. Robert's been up to no good." "Not shocked," I replied. I had my thoughts. Had a PI who told me Robert was hanging out with some shady folks. But I needed what Rodney found. Ever since Robert got with Martha, I kept an eye on him, gathering bits of proof. If he hadn't messed with my wife, I might not have caught on. But then it became my goal to nab him. It'd be doing everyone a favor. Yep, that big shot Robert Fisher was moving over 100 million mob dollars. He used fake companies to buy stuff from Asia and sell it here. Clean money. He's hidden over 5 million in secret bank accounts. Not sure if that's his cut or he's stealing more. "How'd you get this?" He chuckled. "Secrets of the trade." Then he said, "Mr. Fisher's a joke with computers. I went to his house, took everything from his computers, even 2 in his basement he forgot about. Found lots of dirt. Oh, and his work computer too. Dumb to keep it there. Fisher was in deep with some bad folks. If they knew about the 5 million he took, they'd be mad." I wasn't shocked. Robert was a sneak. Thinking about those photos with Martha hurt, but this info meant I had him. "Thanks. Your work is top-notch," I said. In the dark, his grin showed, and Rodney tried hard to not laugh as he said, "The best bit? I took his dirty money, moved it all and shut his accounts. He'll be shocked when he can't find his cash." He laughed then. "Thanks." I grinned. "Good job." But wait, there's more. All the new account stuff is on your new computer. You can check it whenever. It's all yours. Rodney found this funny. I nearly laughed. It was sweet payback. I had fooled Robert Fisher. He'd guess I took his money since I vanished when it did, but he'd never be sure. He had my wife, but I had his cash. I wondered why he'd even do this. Top partners make lots of money. Maybe Robert thought about leaving Sophia for Martha, tough to see why, and knew Sophia would take a lot in a split. Most of their wealth was her family's, but still, it barely made sense unless you knew Robert. Yes, Robert would steal from the mob just because he thought he could. I hope you kept a bit for yourself. No way. Messing with Fisher was enough. Hand over the phone and laptop, I'll head out. You should take something. He shook his head as I handed them over. Thanks, Rodney. He looked at me, serious now. No thanks needed. What you did for me, and more. He seemed to tear up. For my mom and sis, I'll always be in your debt. Take care, man." As he stepped out of the car and the snow fell around him, he turned back and said, "I'll use your phone for parts and the laptop will end up back in your office like magic. All clean, of course." He gave me one last smile. Then he was gone. The car drove south through the snow. My thoughts were far away. It felt like all the links to my past life were quickly fading. An hour later, we stopped at a snow-covered closed strip mall in Geary, Indiana. As Oleg and I went through the back door of a shut-down hair salon, the smell of fresh coffee and Clara Pickford's smile welcomed us. She owned several fancy hair places near Chicago. I had defended her against tough landlords and a really bad split from a business partner. Without knowing, she had gotten mixed up with the Chicago mob. I had some connections and called in favors, so now she was doing well on her own. I also helped her through a messy divorce 5 years back, even getting some help to make sure her soon-to-be ex followed the restraining order against him. After the divorce, which Tony Preston handled for free, her ex vanished for good. He just couldn't be made to stay away from her. She hugged me tight, her solid and ample chest pressing against mine. Clara was a striking woman in her mid-30s, tall with amazing legs and dark eyes that lit up whenever she saw me. She had been cutting my hair for years and after all the help wouldn't let me pay. Though I did other favors for her over time, she didn't hide that she wanted more than friendship, but I was a traditional guy still in love with his wife. A shame. "I'm so sorry, George. If you were my guy, well, you know how I feel. Martha's a fool." I just stood there feeling her warmth through the tight red wool dress. In her heels, she was almost as tall as my 6'1". "Wow, George. First time seeing you in a tux. I think you should let me go before we make Oleg blush," she laughed. I didn't realize I was holding her so close or for that long. She felt so nice and smelled so good. If we were by ourselves? I could tell she felt it too. I let her go, but not wanting to. She grinned, knowing she made me feel all warm inside. Clara made coffee for me and Oleg and had me sit in the last old barber chair there. Its brown leather was cracked. She got close to me as she loosened and took off my silk bow tie and unbuttoned my shirt at the top. It felt like she was getting me ready for bed. This just made me more flustered. For the next hour, she worked on my hair, while Oleg sat in a corner on an old chair, smoking, reading the paper, and drinking coffee. Christmas tunes played softly from a small radio on the shelf. Clara's hands were like magic as she cut, trimmed, and dyed. I realized how much I missed being close. With all the hard stuff lately, I shoved those wants aside. But now, as work stress and bad days at home seemed far away, I focused on how I felt right now. Finally, she turned me to face the old mirror. I was shocked. My hair was way shorter than I liked, and now dark, almost black. I liked the cut, but wasn't sure about the color, though I knew it wouldn't last. "Clara, I'm shocked. I don't even know it's me." "That's the point, right?" She had a proud smile, but looked a bit sad. She touched my hand. "You don't have to go. I'd be glad to hide you at my place in Wisconsin." I held her hand. "I really have to go, but I'll come back. You know I don't let anyone else cut my hair," she said with a smile, a tear rolling down her cheek. Oleg came in with a suitcase, and I went into the small, cold bathroom to put on an old flannel shirt, khaki cargo pants, and worn-out work boots. Clara teased me, calling me a chicken for not changing in front of her in the shop. I just laughed. Over my clothes, I wore a camo jacket. An old baseball cap topped it off. It wasn't that I couldn't be spotted by someone who knew me. It was more that now I looked just like any other working guy. Clara gave me a big, tearful kiss before letting me go. I was off again, this time heading 200 miles more to a bus stop near St. Louis, Missouri. I said goodbye to Oleg a few blocks away from the station, just in case there were cameras. From there, I took a long ride on a big bus 1,000 miles south to El Paso. My passport said I was Ezra Herbert. It was a real passport, and I looked enough like him to pass, except under the harshest looks. It took 2 days to get to El Paso. I hadn't been on a bus in years, and now I remembered why. I walked into Ciudad Juarez, barely looked at by a bored Mexican officer. I then caught a cab to a tiny airstrip on the edge of the city. It used to serve business jets when Juarez was booming before it got a bad rep. I met my pilot there and saw the old 172 he flew. We didn't swap names, and his pay was already sorted. A few hours later, we were hundreds of miles south of Juarez, outside Mexico City. The pilot gave me a FedEx envelope with a new passport, travel papers, a credit card, and a Madrid ticket inside. He also gave me a bag with some clothes. I left Ezra Herbert's passport in the envelope on the Cessna's seat. A couple of hours later, I found myself sitting in the first-class part of a big plane, the 777, flying over the ocean to Madrid, on my way to Dublin. Now, I had a Canadian passport that said I was George Grayson. After a quick tidy-up in a little hotel near the airport, my hair was a lot lighter and I was wearing jeans, a white shirt, and a slightly worn-out blazer. Just what you'd expect a uni teacher on a break from the University of BC to wear. It was Wednesday morning when I finally got to Dublin. My next move was to catch a train heading 178 miles south to a seaside place called Kinsale, picked on a whim to be my hideout for a few months. Martha Randall was really good at deciding what matters most. She could look at any trouble or task, figure how important it was, then take it on or skip it for something more urgent. This skill made her work a hit. But when both she and her husband George's careers started to really kick off, they found themselves having less and less time for one another. It just happened. So Martha's skill at picking what to focus on got a bit out of balance. In the old days, Martha always put being a great wife and mom first. But as her daughters grew up, George's career took off, and her own business grew. The business she started as a hobby when her girls went to high school. Her focus shifted. Martha would say no if anyone suggested she was ignoring her husband or daughters. She managed the house, looked after the staff, and made lots of money. But it was true. Her old list of what was most important, being George's wife, lover, and best friend, being the mom to her twin girls, running the house, and then her catering business and everything else, changed. Actually, that's not quite right. In reality, as Martha's hidden self-centered side started to show, she became her own #1 priority. It was a Monday mid-morning, and Martha sat at her big desk in her home office. She was hidden behind heavy sliding doors, enjoying her first moment of calm since last week, along with her first sips of sweet, hot tea her helper Isabella had brought her. The holiday time was always crazy for her, and today was no different with non-stop phone calls since early morning. She was a bit upset by how silly her customers acted and how slow her suppliers were. It was the same each year. She wondered why she kept at it. They weren't hurting for money. Then, she thought of George leaving his job. She didn't want to think about that now. It wasn't top on her list. Even though it drove her crazy sometimes, Martha loved her job. She got to plan fancy parties and mingle with some of Chicago's rich folks. She had just finished updating her plans for the busy season on her computer. Now, it was time to think about something else she had been dealing with, her affair with Robert Fisher. Well, she used to be involved with him until last Friday. When George had to leave because of his heart issue, a thing Martha thought he made up, Robert had pulled her aside. He wanted to sneak away for a quick moment before going back to his wife. Martha felt she had to act like she believed George's heart story and needed to be by his side. She soon found no joy with him, and these days that joy was rare. In the start, being with Robert was fun for Martha, or so she thought. But then Robert began to push too much, treating her badly, using her only for his fun in ways she didn't like. He turned into a real jerk. Why she even started this thing with him was hard to tell. Robert had a way of making people listen, and a while back, when George was too busy with work, Robert started to pay her a lot of mind. He would compliment her a lot, and they met up a few times saying it was about planning a big party at his and Sophia's place. He managed to get her to his big house where he charmed her and got his way with her. Of course, Martha was not just led astray. She had been curious about what drove Robert. He was a man with a lot of pull, big and strong, who didn't like hearing no. Robert always got what he wanted, and he had wanted Martha for a while. At first, she did enjoy the wild side of being with him. Robert liked her in fancy dress-ups and would tear them off and go for it. She was thankful he wasn't as big as George. With George, she needed a lot of gentle care to be ready for him. But George truly loved her, always making sure she was ready and okay. Robert, though, was just using her, rushing in to get his kick. At first, Martha liked it quick with him, the rough way he had her, sometimes not even letting her take off her dress, her fancy underthings torn up. But soon she got tired of it all. She missed the slow, long, good feels George gave her. She started using a lot of lube before seeing Robert. In her mind, she thought this fling with Robert might help George's job. She knew he wanted to be top boss, and he got it. But then he quit, even with Martha trying so hard for him. Why did he do that? She tried not to think about it. On a Friday night, when Robert kept on wanting her, she told him it was over. If he didn't stop, she'd tell Sophia. Robert looked at her, maybe seeing she meant it, and maybe because of what happened with George, he backed off. Martha didn't trust him, but was glad it was over. Then she thought about George and last Friday. Getting ready for a party, she saw him fresh from the shower and was shocked. When did he get so fit and hot? George always stayed in shape, but now he was all muscles and his skin was tan all over. She couldn't remember the last time they were close or even really together. She couldn't remember. It hit her hard on Friday night. George must have started seeing someone else a while back. He got fit and looked good for some young lady who had caught his eye. Even his body below the belt seemed bigger. Maybe it looked that way because he was in better shape, or maybe he was working out that part too, but not with her for sure. Martha watched him get dressed in a sharp new tuxedo. It was stylish, more young-looking. Was he planning to swap her out like he did his old suit? She had to show him she was as hot as any girl he might be with. She put on her stockings and garter belt, knowing he used to like that look on her, though for some reason she hadn't worn them for him in a while. Robert, on the other hand, always wanted her in them. Said it made her more ready for him, no clothes in the way to slow him down. That night, Martha made sure George saw she was going pantyless and winked at him, hinting at a steamy night after their party. But he just gave her a strange look. Did he find her so dull now that he didn't want her? Martha was proud of keeping herself fit with gym, pool, and yoga, looking as good as when they first met. She still caught people's attention. Wasn't she with the biggest deal in their firm? Funny how Robert, known for chasing women, would go after anyone in a dress and heels. These thoughts on Monday morning made her wonder more. Why didn't he tell her about his big step up at work? He must have known ahead of time. That's how things worked. But they didn't keep secrets. The chosen one was sworn to keep a secret, and the big news came out at the party, but of course, they said their wives could know. Becoming a top boss was George's big dream, so why hadn't he told her? She thought of him sharing the news with his secret lover, just like Robert Fisher did with her when they were close in his office, right above where her husband worked just a few days ago. She thought for a moment about how different they were in size. Robert was gentle with her from behind, but George, being longer, made it less comfy for her. She liked it less with him. Where was George anyway? After his talk, he vanished behind the curtains and didn't come back. At that moment, Martha guessed maybe he didn't want to face either the questions or the looks of pity from his friends and workmates and had gone to their hotel room. She found he wasn't there when she arrived, held up by Robert's move and the pity from George's mates. If he had a heart problem, why hadn't he said? He hadn't, had he? She'd been caught up in work and her side thing with Robert, but she was sure she'd remember. The thought of him popped up again as she sat at her desk, looking out at the snowy Lake Forest scene. She thought a guy in that shape wouldn't likely have heart troubles. Could he? Martha ended up giving up waiting at the hotel Friday night and thought maybe he went home, so she got a limo to take her there. The drive was slow due to the snow, but she got there just before 2 a.m. The house looked like something from a Christmas card. With the snow and all the festive decor, it was just right. Every year, she spent a good deal of cash to have people decorate it. She was happy her home was the talk of the street. As soon as she stepped inside, she could tell he hadn't been there. The room was cold and everything felt off. There were no cozy fires or nice smells. She missed the times they were close by the unlit fireplace. She spent the night alone, thinking. George acting strange was new. All of this was odd. Secrets. A big news shared with everyone but her. And now he's gone. She tried calling him as she came back, but got no answer. Did he choose to be with someone else? Was this how George was saying goodbye to her and his job? Martha got up late on Saturday, too busy to think much. George usually was up early making coffee. They hardly spent Saturdays together because she often had things to do. She wondered if he knew about her secret times with Robert. She was very careful, though. But George wasn't on her mind much that day. She had a big event to prepare for that evening, and her helper was there early. She was too busy to worry or call. She got back home very late, noticed George wasn't there, and went to bed puzzled. This was all new to her. She thought she was a good wife. They had a good family, wasn't he happy? She was always there for him, but felt she might have missed something. She pushed those thoughts away. Sunday was another busy day, and work was her focus. On Sunday, she left early to work on a brunch and then a party in Highland Park. Once more, she came home beat and hit the sack, putting her job and her weekend wins out of mind, not even thinking of George. As she sat at her desk, the thought of George threw off her focus on work that Monday morning. Her phone rang. It snapped her back. She picked up, but it wasn't George. "Hi, it's Leo. Just to remind you we're on for 11, snow and all, right?" Hearing the voice made her snap. "Yes, I'll be there." Why did she snap? Maybe lack of sleep. Calls and solving issues usually boosted her. She needed to straighten out what mattered. She had to nail the holiday parties for many. She hadn't dropped the ball before. Then George popped back in her mind. Stop thinking about him, she told herself. No time. She felt a mix of mad and upset that he was messing with her focus and work. If he wants to run off with his fling, fine, she thought. I can't deal with him or any of this right now. Thinking they didn't see much of each other this busy season anyway didn't help. George knew their girls were due home any day and he never missed Christmas, so he'd surely be back by then. Her phone pinged. A text from her assistant. The snow delay messed up the flower delivery and she had to find another source fast. George slipped from her mind for now. About half an hour later, she heard the doorbell. Martha guessed it was a courier. She and George often got a FedEx or UPS package. If it mattered enough to need a sign, Isabella would handle the door. The bell rang again and she heard Isabella's steps outside her office as she went to open the door. Soon, Isabella knocked lightly and was told to come in. I'm sorry, Mrs. Randall, but he said he had to give the package to you in person. Martha saw a young man behind Isabella. He was dressed for the cold and held a big brown envelope. Mrs. Randall? Yes, she answered. He walked into her office and placed the envelope on her desk. She picked it up. It was cold. Then he said, You've been served. What? I'm just the delivery guy, ma'am. Martha sat frozen, holding the cold envelope, her mind not catching on. Slowly, she understood what this envelope might mean. She was shocked to find her hand steady as she opened it with her silver opener. She shook on the inside. Out came the papers. Not many. The top corner read, In the matter of Randall, George wanted a divorce. She read he had asked for it that day because of irreconcilable differences. Martha felt empty. This proved George was with another woman. So much so that he'd leave her after 25 years. Another secret. She thought George still loved her. Maybe this was his cry for her to see him. Yes, that was it, she thought. She had been a good wife and mom, but maybe not enough. Did she ignore him? She pondered this, barely noticing the others. She had been really busy and there was her thing with Robert Fisher, but she was sure that didn't change her feelings for George. Robert was just a fling. She had a big heart for George. She always did. Knowing he loved her back was like a rock for her. It made her strong. It let her be tough at work. George would do anything for her. She was sure he knew she loved him too. How could he not? Why would he ever question her love? Then the young guy coughed, pulling her back from her deep thoughts. This can't be right, she said. Look, lady, I just bring stuff. You got to talk to a lawyer or something, he said. She realized she had spoken her thoughts out loud. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh yeah, there's a note. He said to tell you he hopes you find joy with Robert Fisher. What? She barely spoke, her voice tight. Just what I said, Mrs. Randall. It was clear. He pulled out a tiny yellow note. I wrote it here. See for yourself. He came back, holding out the note. To her, it looked scary. He shrugged and read, Hope you're happier with Robert Fisher. Then he left the note on her desk edge. She couldn't look away. As he walked to the door, Martha felt like she was in a bad dream. What did his words mean? Happy with Robert? No way. Then she got it. George found out. He knew about her and Robert, even though she tried to keep it hidden. He was leaving her, not because he was with someone else, but because she was. It was all a big mix-up. She loved George, not Robert. And George loved her, right? How did this mess happen? Her perfect world was falling apart, but she was going to fight to keep it together. Isabella showed the guy out, then came back. Need anything, ma'am? Martha just stared, then said, No, thanks though, Isabella. Shut the doors. And don't forget, I've got a meeting at 11, so no lunch for me. Got it, ma'am. Sorry. Isabella slid the doors shut. Martha sat deep in thought. The mystery of George's vanishing act was now clear. It wasn't a worry anymore. Plus, she knew he wouldn't skip Christmas with the girls, so they could chat then. Divorce? Silly idea. She adored George, and he loved her. Her phone rang, pulling her back to work. Can I help you, sir? Walking into the small real estate office on Main Street in Kinsale, her beauty struck me. But her voice, with that Irish tone, sounded almost heavenly. Her dark, mid-length auburn hair, bright green eyes, and fair Irish skin shone against her red sweater, which nicely showed off her figure. The rest of her was behind a big old desk with a laptop on it. Yeah. I'm looking for a place to rent, maybe for 6 months or more. Her amused look at my awkwardness made me blush. A rare thing since I've spoken in court and at many meetings without issue. Quite a feat. She seemed entertained, and I managed to smile. Then she stood and came around the desk. I was shocked. In her red sweater and dark green skirt that fell just below her knees, paired with thin belt, dark tights, and black high heels, she was as tall as me. In those heels, we were eye to eye, stunned, just like the British say. I'm Bridget Lorcan. She reached out her hand. And who are you? Her hand was warm. It felt like a tiny zap went through us. I kept holding on, not wanting to let go just yet, but then I did. She still had a fun look on her face, but there was something more, too. I'm George. I stumbled a bit, remembering my new name. George Grayson. Her scent was all around me. I didn't know the name of her perfume, but it drew me in. It's funny how the same scent can smell different on every person. It made me miss how rare it was to meet a woman at work who wore perfume. Nowadays, most places don't like any scents. It's too bad. Nice to meet you, Mr. Grayson. I think we can help you out. Please, sit down. She pointed to the chair by her desk, then went back to her seat. Watching her move was just as nice as when she approached. Her legs were eye-catching. I sat, noticing she still looked amused, but now there was a slight blush. She looked away, starting to type on her laptop. She seemed no older than 30 and so youthful, probably her skin. I saw there was no ring on her finger. I told myself to stop. I was taking a break from my old life. The last thing I needed was to get caught up with someone much younger, but she was easy on the eyes. And just because I was ending my marriage didn't mean I couldn't look. It's quiet this time of year. Not many want to visit the Irish Sea in winter. She had a smile in her voice. Will Mrs. Grayson be joining you? She asked, peeking up from her laptop. No. My answer was simple. I tried to hide my sadness, but it showed. She stopped and looked me up and down, then went back to her computer. So, maybe a flat in town? I shook my head. I'd like somewhere quiet. I don't have a car, so maybe close to shops. She eyed me. There's shops in town, but not much else until spring. It's quiet here. That's what I want. I'm taking a break from university to write. So, maybe a small house, with a view of the water? Sounds great, I said. She got up. I think I've got the right spot. Don't mind walking? I'd like that. I almost said with you. Just a sec then. She took a big bag and went to the back. I looked around while waiting. The place was full of Christmas stuff and very clean. Maybe Miss Lorcan liked it neat or it was slow because of the season. When she came back, she took my breath away again. Now she had on tight jeans that showed off her legs, black boots with a low heel and a leather jacket. Lips looked shiny too. I got up to help her with her coat, breathing in her perfume. She said thank you with a bright smile that made my heart jump. Calm down, I thought. She locked up, and we headed out into the cool December day towards the harbor. Clouds looked like rain might come. We left the small town quickly. Kinsale is tiny, about 2,000 folks. She kept up with me easily. We walked by the bay, then took a quiet road towards a place called Charles Fort. As we walked, she shared bits about the town. It was big on fishing, boats, and folks visiting. From the U.S., she guessed. Nope, Canadian, I said, feeling bad for not being honest. I know a lot of Canadians. You sound more from the U.S. I've stayed in the U.S. quite a bit. Might have rubbed off on me, I joked. She gave a small smile. After a while, we got to Summer Cove. It was a pretty Irish place with a tiny port facing where the River Bandon hits the ocean. Lots of the homes were made of gray stone from around here. She talked up the Bullman Bar as a neat spot for food and drinks. If you want, she added. She didn't like the drink part much. Bet there was a tale there. Not far up a hill above the town and water was Charles Fort. It's a really old star fort made by the British back in the 17th century, she told me as we climbed the hill. It looked cool. Halfway up, Bridget took us on a path off to the side. Up near the top was a plain, big house, white, and next to it a little stone house painted white too, with a slate roof. No straw on the roof, I noted, thinking of that movie, The Quiet Man. Soon we were at the little house. She opened the bright red door. No lock. Had I ever lived somewhere you didn't need to lock up? I couldn't remember. Inside, Bridget flicked on a light in the kitchen to the right. The place had little in it. A big old comfy chair, a table next to it, and a coffee table in the small living room. A worn rug was on the floor. There was a fireplace that I hoped wasn't the only way to stay warm, but it did seem ready for a cozy fire. A worn wooden table and 2 chairs were set up in one corner of the small kitchen. I saw a stove and fridge, a tiny sink, and some tall cupboards with glass doors. Sorry, it's cold. There's a good gas heater. Just doesn't make sense to heat it up with no one around. I watched her go to a round dial on the wall near an arch on the left of the fireplace, leading to a hallway that looked like it went to the front of the house, maybe to a bathroom and a bedroom. It'll get warm soon, she said with a smile I really liked. The bedroom's this way, she pointed down the hallway. I thought I saw her cheeks turn a bit red as she said that, but it was hard to see clearly in the weak afternoon light coming through the front windows of the living room. I followed her through the arch, past a surprisingly nice bathroom, to a single bedroom at the end of the hall. There was an old double bed with 4 tall posts, a bedside table with a lamp, and a worn-out dresser. The bed had an old quilt on it that someone clearly made by hand. As we left the bedroom, she mentioned, "There's plenty of hot water, too." Walking back to the living room, I looked out at the water and saw another old fort from the 1600s and then down at the harbor. This place was exactly what I was looking for. "Sorry, no TV or Wi-Fi. There's a shop in the village that can help if needed. You pay for gas and electricity yourself, and they're tracked with a separate meter. But water and trash pickup are included." I turned to her. "I'll take it." "I like someone who makes up their mind quick. But are you sure you can pay for it?" she playfully asked. "I don't think you would have shown me this place, me being a not-rich academic, if you thought I couldn't afford it. Plus, with the season and probably no one renting it until spring, I guess the owner wants to rent it out fast." That made her look a bit worried. She didn't like to see her sad. Did she know who owned the place? Was it a person in bad times? "I do know who owns it. Even if no one's living there now, she won't sell it cheap." Her smile came back bright as the sun after rain. I smiled too. "All right, I don't mind paying more. I'll take it for at least half a year. Mr. Grayson?" "Call me George, please." "George." She breathed out fast. "It's 1,000 euros each month, and you need to pay the first month and the same for a damage fee right away." I figured it out quick. That was about $1,300 every month. Not too much, really, since this place seemed just right for me. Money wasn't a worry for me. I could have paid more without thinking twice. I nodded. "It's a deal." You could see she felt better. Was this place special to her, or was she happy about making some good money from me since I said yes to 6 months? "So, when can I move in?" "Since all my things are still at your office and I don't have a place to stay tonight, what about today?" "Oh dear." She looked worried. "Is there a problem?" "I'm not sure I can get the cleaning team today." "That's okay, I can clean up myself." "Really?" "Sure." I didn't want to leave. The heater was making it warm and cozy. I thought about asking her to stay for a drink or maybe tea, but I didn't have any chairs to sit on or things to drink. As we were leaving, a big collie dog came running up to Bridget, tail wagging like crazy. "Jenny, you being good today?" "George, meet Jenny. She looks after the place. Be nice to her. You're cool with dogs, right? She might decide you're her new friend. She tends to do that with the people staying here. I petted Jenny's head. Yeah, I like dogs. Just been a while since I was around one. Growing up, my home was big in North Chicago, always full of kids, a dog, and at least one cat. Jenny, come by anytime? As we walked to town with Jenny behind us, I learned where to buy bed sheets, house stuff, and food. Good thing they all had delivery. Back at her office, I gave Bridget the money for my stay, a whole 6,000 euros more. I thought the people she worked for could use it, and she sure could use the bonus. I didn't really look at the lease I signed. Not great for a lawyer. I didn't see who the landlord was, but Bridget signed for them. Seeing the money on her desk, she looked shocked. Then she checked the time. "Oh dear, Ellie, I must hurry," she said. "Sorry, George, I have to go now. Need to get to the bank and then pick up my daughter Ellie from school." Just my luck, I thought. Just as I was about to ask Bridget out, I find out she has a daughter. Maybe there's a husband too. She was very pretty, so it seemed likely she wasn't alone. Well, maybe that's for the best. I was going to be single soon anyway, with lots of time for dates. This surprised me. During my travels, I had a lot of time to think and promised myself to stay away from romance, to never let myself be that open. It seemed like good advice, less heartache. Bridget locked her office door and shook my hand. When our hands touched, I felt a spark. It wasn't just me. Then she walked away, with Jenny following. So after thinking of some shopping, I planned to grab dinner at Bullman, then maybe say hi to the folks who owned the cottage I'd be living in for half a year. But first, I needed to hop online. I could have asked Bridget to use her office Wi-Fi, but she seemed busy. Craving coffee and feeling a bit peckish, I followed my nose down Main Street until I found a cafe with a window sign that read, Internet. Inside, a friendly blonde with an accent from far away took my order for a big bowl of seafood soup and coffee. Once online, my inbox was stuffed with work stuff and a bunch of sorry you're leaving messages. But I was on the lookout for 3 specific emails and found 2. One from Tony Preston saying Martha got the divorce papers 2 days back on Monday, and another from Barry that read, Tsunami received. I owe you. I zipped through my emails again for anything from Martha, but nothing. I thought she might have tried ringing me, but with my phone off since leaving Chicago, maybe she'd email. I was wrong. I gave in and checked my new phone's missed calls. Loads of calls. But Martha's 3 from last weekend stood out. None after she got the divorce news. Weird, I thought. Even weirder, no message left. Did she even notice I left? Did it bother her? Maybe she was so mad at me or tired of me, she was ready to let the divorce just happen. Why not? She messed up, got caught. Maybe she wanted out to be with Robert or someone else, not worrying about our marriage. Martha was a looker, successful, wouldn't be alone for long. That thought made me sad. I pushed away the sad thoughts. They didn't help. My marriage was done for. What did I think Martha would do? I did hope for her to feel sorry, not to not care at all. So much for my big plans. Why was I even in Ireland? I barely tasted my late lunch, my laptop keeping me linked to the world I tried to leave behind, lost in thought. Should I just fly back, face Martha, and then move out? This was not how I saw things going. Yet I had signed for 6 months here, and Kinsale looked perfect. A pretty small town by the sea in Ireland where I could be alone. I came here because I needed a break. Time to mourn my marriage and mend my heart. And to rest. Suddenly I felt the most tired I ever had. Martha had controlled my feelings and life for too long. Now, I was going to get past this, and I decided to stick around in Ireland and just relax for a bit. Travel had worn me out, but my soul felt even more tired. Walking through Kinsale's streets, now lit up for Christmas in the early evening with my bag on my shoulder and my suitcase rolling behind, I thought maybe time and space would help heal my broken heart. Kinsale might be just the right place. Bridget Lorcan was a bit sad to see George Grayson go. He was good-looking, nice, and seemed rich. She felt bad for asking him for so much money for the rent of Mary's cottage. She charged him double the usual rate for this slow season. She'd talk about this guilt with Father Andrew in her next confession, but the cash she now held tightly was much needed. Getting rent for a month plus a deposit would have been great, but 6 months plus deposit felt like a miracle. This morning, she almost had to shut down the real estate shop she ran with her sister Caitlin. But now, she could pay the late rent for their office, keep the company going, have enough for food, and cover her daughter's school costs until tourists came back in spring. She rushed into Scott O'Leary's small print shop. He was her landlord, a nice man of 70 she knew all her life. Seeing her smile surprised him. Smiles were rare these past months. He knew her business, like many in town and across Ireland, had hit hard times since the economy crashed in late 2008. "Mr. O'Leary, I've got the rent." "Really, Bridget?" He knew her tough times, a widow with a young girl, and hadn't pushed for rent. He was shocked as she laid out 1,500 euros from a stack of notes in her hand onto his old ink-stained desk. "You win the lottery, Bridget?" he joked. "No, but I just rented out Mary's cottage for 6 months, all paid up front," she said, excited. "Wow, a foreigner, right?" Locals wouldn't pay 6 months in advance. "A Canadian. Must go, need to pick up Ellie from school." She left, her scent and cheer filling the room, making O'Leary wish he was younger. He smiled, storing the money, happy about the better Christmas for his family thanks to this surprise. Bridget went back the way she came to get her daughter from school in Summer Cove. She stopped to pay her gas and electric bills, then to the bank to deposit money. By the time she got to the school, everyone in town knew about George Grayson. They called him the rich Canadian at Mary's cottage, all thanks to Mr. Scott O'Leary, who loved to share news. Later that night, Bridget sat with her tea, watching the fire in her living room. It was 8. Ellie was in bed and she was cozy, covered by a throw her mom made. By her side was the black cat Aisling, who showed up one fall morning and never left. She was sweet and great at catching mice. The rain was coming down hard, and Bridget thought about George, hoping he was okay. She saw him come home in a taxi at 6:30 carrying bags. She thought about asking him over for dinner, but then saw him head towards Bullman's for a meal. She was kind of glad, as she hadn't shopped, and there wasn't much food at home. Now that she had money, she planned to buy more food. Maybe she and Ellie could eat out sometimes, instead of just having porridge and soup with bread. Ellie never complained, though. She was a good kid, and Bridget felt lucky to have her. Thinking of her late husband, Louis, made her sad. He passed away 4 years ago. He was a caring man and loved Ellie, but he had a problem with drinking. In the early days, he drank less and almost stopped when Ellie was coming. But then things got worse again. Bridget blamed his brother Brendan a bit. He and Louis owned a boat and fished together. Brendan was single, a bit selfish, and acted young for his age, but he was the older brother. One night, Louis came home mad and hit Bridget for the first time. If her folks were still around, she might have left him right then. Like many who hurt others, he was sorry after and tried to make it better. But every time she hoped it was the last, Louis would drink with his brother, come home mean, call her bad names, and hit her if she didn't want to be close. 4 years ago, Brendan and Louis went fishing even though a big storm might hit. Louis didn't make it back. Ellie was just 2 and didn't really miss her dad. Bridget felt free when Louis died and talked a lot with Father Andrew. He knew about the bad stuff at home and helped Bridget feel better about her mixed feelings. Bridget and her sister started a house selling business with the little money from insurance. It was the end of 2007, and houses were selling fast in coastal Ireland. They saved money just in case. And good thing they did because the business slowed down. Their side gig of renting out places saved them. They still sold a house now and then, but not like before. Bridget had some cash and no late bills. She got a house and a small home named after her grandma from her parents. The small home was where her grandma lived alone for 40 years. The big worry now was Brendan. He was a big, strong man who acted like Bridget chose the wrong brother. Brendan liked her before she married Louis. It seemed Brendan made things worse when she was with Louis. After Louis went missing, Brendan thought Bridget would want him instead. But she didn't at all. She tried not to hate Brendan, but his annoying grin, unwanted moves, and his habit of drinking made her mad and scared. He told everyone in town she was his, and Bridget thought he scared off anyone else who might like her. She didn't really want to get married again, but that was for her to decide, not Brendan. Her eyes moved to the window where she could see Mary's house and the lights on. Thinking of George Grayson there made her smile. He didn't wear a ring, and when she said Mrs. Grayson at work, she saw a quick, sad look on his face. He seemed nice and smart, even if he let her pay too little for rent. She felt bad about it. but liking the safety she felt pushed those thoughts away. The next morning, as she got Ellie ready for school, she saw George leave his house for a run. She felt cold looking at him. He wore a hoodie, wool hat, shorts, and shoes, but his legs were bare. She knew Canadians were tough, but she wouldn't choose to run like that in Ireland's winter. But the day looked dry, at least no rain. At about 9:30, Bridget got a surprise. She had just opened the office when George Grayson came in. This time, he wore clothes better for the cold, an open coat with a leather collar, a thick sweater, cotton pants, and strong boots. He looked better than he did yesterday, though he still seemed a bit closed off. She had noticed that look before, thinking it was just because he was tired and in a new place. Bridget was glad she had dressed up that morning, choosing a dark skirt, a light sweater, and tall boots. When she smiled at him, his face lit up too. She tried not to get too excited about it, telling herself it was silly to have such a crush on a man she barely knew, especially since she was a mom with a 6-year-old. Still, she felt her cheeks warm up as he came closer. "Bridget." She really liked how his American accent made her name sound. "Can we talk for a sec?" She nodded, worrying he might want his money back after staying at Mary's cottage. But then, she thought the smile she saw must mean something good. She stood up to greet him, fighting back those giddy feelings. "Please, come in, Mr. Grayson." "Bridget, call me George, please." "All right, George." She liked how his name sounded, too. "What can I do for you?" "I was thinking of buying some extra stuff for the cottage," he said. Bridget felt her face get hot. She hadn't told him she was the owner. Now her little secret was out. "I'm sure the owner would be okay with that." She smiled, feeling foolish. "Well, that's great then," he said, looking like he was about to leave. "I should have said it before, but I'm actually your landlord." "I didn't want you to get the wrong idea." Her voice got softer. He walked up to her, and as he got close, she thought of how fit he looked, from what she could see under his running clothes. "Should have read the fine print," he said, grabbing her hand. "That zing from yesterday was back. It wasn't just by chance. But it looks like the whole town knows I'm staying at your place." He laughed. Bridget liked his laugh. It was happy and young. She had seen hints of his humor before, but hadn't heard him laugh out loud. "Yep, that's how it goes here when it's quiet. Folks can't help but poke their noses into others' business." She laughed too. "I don't mind if the town knows. I bet plenty are jealous because I'm living next to the most beautiful woman in Kinsale." She chuckled with him, but felt shy about him thinking she was good-looking. "And knowing you were the one renting the place, you could have asked for more money and I'd have happily paid." She felt a twinge of guilt but smiled and said, "Well, George, if you stick around, I'll remember that." They both cracked up. Bridget liked how he was easy to laugh with and how real his laughter felt. She later thought about how long they would have stayed there, hands together, if she hadn't brought up the furniture he wanted in the cottage. When she did, he let go of her hand, which made her a bit sad, and said, "After a night in that bed, I think it was made for someone smaller, so I'd like to swap that out, the rug in the main room, and maybe get a desk and a few other things." She felt bad for charging so much for rent and not giving a comfy place to sleep. "George, that's okay." He gave her a smile. "I'll leave them here when I head back to Canada, but getting some new furniture and a mattress will make living here nicer." The warm smile he gave could almost beat the cold feeling of him going away. She didn't want to think about that. Oh, and the old bed and carpet. Where should they go? Bridget shook her head. "They're not worth keeping, so they can be thrown out. I'll get Aiden's to take them when they bring the new stuff." "Aiden's, you're buying from there?" Bridget knew that place was fancy and pricey, but he seemed like he could afford it. "Yes, Miss Aiden was super helpful. She showed me lots of beds and said they'd have whatever I pick." Bridget felt a bit red thinking about Kate Aiden, with her blonde hair and big chest. She pictured Kate showing George the beds, maybe flirting a bit, which made Bridget mad. Why was she so clingy over George after just one day? She knew it was silly, but felt like hitting Kate Aiden, a girl she's known since they were kids. As he was leaving, he turned and asked, "Will I see you later tonight?" "Yes, I'll be here, Ellie and I." She wondered why she mentioned that. "Then see you tonight. Have a great day." The office felt super empty when he left. A couple of hours later, her sister Caitlin stormed in. That's the best way to describe how Caitlin moves. With 3 boys and a husband who's a lawyer, she's always busy. Caitlin was older by 2 years, but they looked so alike they often got mixed up as twins. Today she wore her usual fancy clothes, a silk top, wool skirt, and the newest boots, with a trendy tan coat. Bridget was in luck that her sis loved to shop for clothes a lot because she got a bunch of barely worn clothes that Caitlin would call "so last year." Bridget knew too that the clothes gift was her sister being kind, knowing Bridget had less. "Just came by to see how you're doing and talk about my morning," she said as she put 2 coffee cups on the desk. One smelled like eggnog, the other a plain, non-fat chai for Bridget. Caitlin took off her coat and sat down across Bridget. Bridget was glad her laptop was turned away, so Caitlin couldn't see she was looking up British Columbia, George's place. Why was she so into this guy? Could be bad news for all she knew, but no, those kind eyes didn't fit a bad guy. She looked back at her sister, who seemed to be waiting for her to talk. "Just after I took the boys to school, I ran into Mr. O'Leary." Bridget made a face, knowing what was next. "He was all happy, wished me a Merry Christmas, and said you paid the last 3 months' rent." She stopped to see what Bridget would say. When nothing came, she added, "When were you going to tell me you were late on the rent here?" Bridget smiled and joked, "When I was close to having to sleep with Mr. O'Leary to keep the place." Caitlin burst into laughter. Then with a spark in her eye, she said, "From what I hear, that might not be so bad." "What? He's so old," Bridget laughed. "You need to listen to the town talk more." Turns out Mr. O'Leary had quite the fun times back in the day, and many were jealous when Sadie got him. Really? About 15 years back, when Sadie left us, it seemed every single lady around County Cork, and maybe a few who weren't so free, decided to drop by his place. It took Freya 3 years to catch him, but in that time he sure did see a lot of folks, and everyone seemed happy with how things went. Bridget just smiled. "Caitlin, where do you even get this stuff?" "Actually, never mind. I don't think I want to know." "Speaking of which, I ran into your rich friend this morning." "Oh, where?" "Over at Aiden's. I was picking up that new light stand, the one Brian's been looking at. I'm giving it to him for Christmas. And guess who was there? Mr. George Grayson himself. I've got to say he's quite the looker, and Kate Aiden was all over him, acting all flirty. She introduced us, acting like she'd found her dream guy, but we both know Kate isn't too picky with her guys." Bridget tried to keep up her smile, thinking, surely not Kate Aiden and George. She said, "I think George's tastes are a bit finer than that." Caitlin gave her a look, trying to understand what she just heard. "So it's George now, is it?" Bridget felt her cheeks go red. "He did say to call him George." What? Nothing. Or maybe something. "Is George your dream guy?" "Don't be silly." But she couldn't help blushing more. Caitlin took a sip of her coffee, picturing her sister and George Grayson together. "You two would be a good pair?" Bridget wasn't shocked Caitlin would say that. She often said what she thought, and Bridget had daydreamed about it too, but she pushed back. "I barely know him." "He's renting from you for the next half year, right? That's enough time. Unless Kate Aiden gets to him first." Bridget tried to sound cool. "Kate's not what he's looking for," Caitlin said. "How do you know? She's got all the looks and she's always up for fun. What more could a guy ask for?" They both chuckled and said at the same time, "Does her dad own a bar?" "Bridget, hear me out. While that girl was pretty much showing off on the beds at the store, your George looked just puzzled. He wasn't buying it. That guy knows a thing or two, and I think we can make it so you're the one for him." "Caitlin, I'm not so sure. When I asked if Mrs. Grayson would come with him, you should have seen his face. Someone's hurt him a lot. He hides it well, but I guess he came to Ireland to escape her, and if that's true, then he really wants the quiet of the cottage." "Even better. You're just right to help him forget who hurt him. Remember, in houses, it's all about spot, spot, spot. Now let's find you some better clothes." Later, Bridget and Ellie were in a cab heading home. It was near 4 o'clock, and the little bit of sun that day was almost gone. She knew it would be pretty much dark by 4:30 this time of year. The short days and lots of clouds and rain made winter tough, but she was happy that this year her Christmas was brighter thanks to a stranger who came out of nowhere. Bridget had picked up her daughter from school, and they had walked into Kinsale to shop. With bags full of food and some extras they hadn't had in a while, they were eager to get home. So Bridget chose a cab. It was a big spend, but Bridget knew they couldn't have carried all their shopping. Sitting in the cab, not looking at the beautiful scenes around, Bridget thought about what she and Caitlin talked about. The food she bought showed she planned to make some tasty dinners with George coming over. Why had she let Caitlin push her into this? It was simple when she thought about it. She hadn't told her sister, but she really liked the tall guy from Canada. Sure, she acted like she didn't, but Caitlin knew her too well. Being the busybody she was, she got Bridget to see that giving it a shot with George wasn't a bad idea. Bridget felt a buzz of thrill. Was it just yesterday when they first met? As they went up the hill and got near the house, Bridget saw a bunch of cars and vans parked out front. There were men on the roof, too. What was going on? Was there some sort of emergency? But she saw no police or fire trucks. What was happening? Getting closer, she could see the names on the vans. One was the cleaning crew she used, another for fixing roofs, and one more, the biggest van, belonged to a furniture shop. As the taxi weaved through the parked cars to her front door, she also saw a van painted with a funny chimney sweep and a car that had Ross Wireless Service written on its side. She jumped out of the taxi and told Barry, the driver, she'd be right back. "Barry, hang on a moment. Gotta check this," she shouted without looking back as she rushed to the cottage. The driver helped Ellie out and went to get the bags. Bridget, dodging a ladder, noticed the door was newly painted as she walked in. Inside, everything looked different. New paint, furniture, and curtains. But she was too shocked to take all the changes in once she saw Kate, Aiden, and George in the kitchen. She saw red when she saw Kate in her tiny skirt and very tall shoes wrap her arms around George's neck and kiss him in a way that was way too bold. What made Bridget even more mad was that George didn't push her off. He seemed to like it. Kate, she got. She chased after anyone in pants. But George, her George, how could he? Then George pulled back. Since he was looking at Bridget, he saw her first. His face went from shock to sad as Bridget turned and left through the door. She moved fast, missed the ladder, and almost bumped into Callum Patrick, the boss of the roofing crew. She didn't really hear him say he couldn't finish now, but would be back early tomorrow, as she rushed past him with the big blue tarp in his hands. She kept her tears back until she had paid Barry the driver, but as she walked into the house, she couldn't anymore. She looked at the food that needed to be put away and thought about the cost of the meals she had planned for George. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Ellie asked. "Yes, dear, I'm just tired," she lied. Ellie was smart and could tell when her mom was upset. This time, she was confused. Her mom had been so happy while shopping and on the drive home. Ellie wondered if it was all the work at the cottage or maybe because of the handsome man who moved in next door. Bridget was in the middle of putting groceries in the fridge when she stopped. She just realized the roof of the cottage was gone. It was painted, and if she remembered right, the kitchen had new stuff in it. Who was going to pay for all that? She couldn't. George had tricked her with his visit this morning, just asking about some furniture. Bridget was furious. How dare he? He had a whole team fixing up the place in a big way, and there he was, kissing Kate Aiden in the kitchen of her grandma's little house. He might be with that Kate Aiden now, in his new bed. Her tears turned to anger. How could she have been such a fool? George Grayson was just like all men, not to be trusted. She made up her mind to face Mr. George Grayson first thing in the morning, and she hoped it would be the last time she had to deal with him for the next half a year. And Kate Aiden could have him for all she cared. If he was foolish enough to get tangled up with her, then they were perfect for each other. Claire Booth Luce once said, "No good deed goes unpunished, right?" I had spent more than 12,000 euros fixing and making Mary's cottage nice. And what did I get for it? Well, I got a house that felt like home, with all the comforts, like new stuff to use, Wi-Fi, and better electricity. The roof didn't leak, and the fireplace didn't smoke up the place anymore. Then there was that hot kiss with Kate Aiden. Kate was smart, pretty, and knew her way around decorating. She had a good time spending my money. She was a lot like Martha. They'd likely get along. As much as I liked the kiss, I knew it was a bad idea as soon as it was over. Right now, I didn't need any woman, especially not another Martha. That wasn't completely true, and that's where I was stuck. Bridget Lorcan got under my skin, but in a good way. I was actually excited to get to know her and her daughter better over the next months. Did I want to be with her forever? No way. Or maybe. I was so mixed up I barely knew myself, let alone trying to get what a beautiful younger woman who was also my landlord was all about. So, on the downside of things, I saw the look on Bridget's face when she caught me and Kate kissing. Well, to be honest, Kate kissed me first, and I won't lie, I liked it a lot. Kate said it was a thank you for letting her change the cottage how she wanted. Of course, the big wad of cash I left at her office made her happy too. I didn't get a kiss from the cleaning ladies, nor from Patrick, the guy who fixes roofs, nor from Brian, the painter, even though I'm sure they were happy with the extra money too. Just from Kate. But I'd lie if I said a kiss from one of the cleaning ladies, especially the thin one with dirt on her face and stunning blue eyes, wouldn't have been nice. Now I was walking around my changed living room, trying to make myself believe it was better to wait until tomorrow to talk to Bridget. I knew the best time was now, but I was dragging my feet. I had to make things right about all the changes I made to the cottage without asking her. Mainly if she thought she'd have to pay for the new roof and the electrical work, which were fire risks, just like the chimney. I needed to tell her I paid for everything and she owed me nothing. The harder part was explaining the kiss with Kate. I knew I should explain even if I didn't have to. Bridget's look could have frozen us right there. What could I say? I clearly liked the kiss too much to say Kate was to blame. They do say, the truth will set you free. I hoped it would because I had no other plan if that went wrong. The thought of facing Bridget, all fiery and mad, turned me into a coward. So I just turned and left the house. The cold of the winter night hit me as I went across the yard without a coat. I got to her door quick, happy to see lights in her small house. I knocked and waited, heart loud. I thought this was silly. Here I was, a man with grown girls, a lawyer, not great at being a husband, at the door of a lady I just met, saying sorry for a mess-up. I didn't need this, but I had to tell her. I didn't want Bridget to think bad of me. Even if she never talked to me again, at least I'd have said my piece. Brrr. Why was she taking so long? Just as I was about to knock again, she opened the door. She looked surprised, sad, maybe a bit mad. Before I could talk, she said, "I thought you'd have plans tonight." I looked at her. I saw her beauty and tried not to be mad about Martha. I just said, "Not tonight, or any night soon." Bridget's mad look faded. "Well, since you're free, come in. We need to chat." She moved to let me in. I stepped into a cozy room, full of old but nice things and a good fire going. No need for a chimney fix, I noted. Jenny, the dog, came by, happy. She had been a big help with fixing up the place. At least dogs still liked me, I thought. I watched Bridget turn to me. She didn't tell me to sit or relax. She looked real pretty, hair in a ponytail, wearing a dark blue wool top that made her look nice, jeans that fit her legs just right, and flat shoes on her feet. She had her arms crossed. Her face was red. Still mad? Hard to guess. "Bridget, I'm here to say sorry and to tell you about the cottage." "Yes?" She didn't seem happy. Yes, still mad, I thought. "This morning, I only planned to get stuff for the cottage. I didn't mean to trick you. I just didn't tell you all." Her green eyes sparked. "There's a rule that if you're in a hole, stop making it bigger, but I had to keep going. I needed her to understand I didn't do her wrong." I went on, even though she looked at me sharply. "Last night I tried to make a fire. Smoke filled the room and the fireplace didn't work. It was so cold, especially with the windows open all night. Then it started to rain. I like rain sounds, but at midnight the rain hit me, not just a bit. It felt like a flood pouring on my face in bed." I saw her face change from mad to shocked. "So, when I saw you this morning, I thought it was okay to call someone to clean the chimney, and I asked Mr. Patrick to check the roof." I didn't say I got his number from Kate. Best not to bring her up. "I thought he'd just fix a bit and I'd tell you later. I was wrong. He said we needed a new roof and could get his team to start by noon. I'm sorry I didn't ask you first. I thought I'd see you later in the day, but I did pay him." Bridget looked a bit less worried when I mentioned that. "And while they fixed the roof, the house got a new paint job too. I thought the place could look nicer, not saying it was Kate's plan. Then the new kitchen stuff came and broke the power. Mr. Patrick told us to call an electric fixer, and well, you know how that went." Bridget's look got softer. I saw a small smile and she was less stiff. I tried not to stare too much. Oh, George, I had no clue. But then she looked sad. "I'll pay you back all of it." I went closer and held her hands. "Bridget, you don't have to." She stepped back. "I won't take handouts." Tears were almost there. I smiled. "Can I keep going?" She nodded. "Let me lend you the cash for 6 months. If I stay, we can cut the rent each month by a bit of the loan." Before she could say anything, I said, "I know summer rent goes up, so maybe keep it the same and that extra can pay back the loan." She wiped her eyes and said, "Thank you, George, that works." We just looked at each other, then she asked, "Hungry?" "Forgot to eat with all this going on." "I'll cook something, come on." She started to leave, but I held her hands again. "Bridget, there's nothing going on with me and Kate, and never will be." She just looked at me, then nodded. We went to the kitchen, hands still together. That's how it began, no big love moves. I got a simple kiss on the cheek when I left, but it was enough to show I liked her, mixed with old bad memories. Or should I say bad memories staying with me, making me scared of getting hurt again. But every time I looked into Bridget's eyes, the life I left in Chicago felt so far back and far away. When I got back to Mary's cottage that night, that old life came back. I sat in my new soft chair in my room that had new paint and new stuff, with a happy fire and a drink in my hand, and turned on my computer. It quickly joined my new Wi-Fi. There were fewer emails than before. I got rid of many and saved some for later. There were some asks from the people I work with about the work I gave them, but nothing too hard. I was sure I could write back safe in the thought they couldn't find me unless Robert Fisher put it together. Still no word from Martha or my girls, Emily and Olivia. But my phone had happy texts from them about coming home for Christmas and their flight to O'Hare. Martha still hadn't told them we were splitting up. I texted Oleg to pick them up from the airport. Then I sat, thinking about what to do next. I had hoped they would hear it from their mom, maybe in tears, saying how it was all her fault and I was leaving her. So much for that idea. When was Martha planning to tell them? I could see how it would go when the girls got home. "Hi, Mom, Merry Christmas. By the way, where's Dad? Oh, he's gone and leaving me." So Martha was making me seem like the bad guy. Okay then. I looked at my phone and saw it was midday in California, so I called. It took a few rings and I thought I'd have to leave a message when Emily answered, "Hi, Dad, Merry Christmas. Did you see our text?" That was the toughest call I ever had to make. I felt dumb telling my girls I was in Asia and wouldn't be back for Christmas because I needed some time off. I tried to make them see that their mom and I were not getting along and this was for the best, but they knew me too well. "So Mom did something silly, right?" That's what they said. But it was more like they already knew. They must have seen the trouble before I did. I was trying to not be mad at Martha, so I just said they should talk to her about it. I promised my crying girls I'd keep in touch by phone and messages, and once I settled down, I'd have them over, maybe during spring break. But now I was in Ireland, living as George Grayson, and bringing the Randall girls over would be hard to explain to Bridget and the others in the village. Maybe I could travel to another part of Europe for a few weeks, rent a place, and meet my girls there. But as Scarlett O'Hara said, I'll think about that tomorrow. When I got into my new warm and cozy bed, I was mad and sad. This whole vanishing act was not going well. I was still helping my work friends, my daughters missed me, and my soon-to-be ex-wife still seemed to be messing with me. I wondered if she ever really cared about anyone but herself. That was a bit harsh, but I was not in a good place. The next morning, I felt a bit better, and after my run, I bumped into Bridget and met her daughter Ellie on their way to school. Later that day, Bridget and I had lunch together. That started a pattern. Most days I'd see Bridget, usually in the village for lunch or coffee, and sometimes we'd go to the Bullman for dinner. Ellie was loved by everyone, and sometimes we'd go to Bridget's house for tea. After Ellie went to bed, Bridget and I would sit close on her big sofa in her living room and talk. I tried to listen more than I talked, not wanting to get caught in lies that would surely bite me later. I kept thinking it was dumb to start this act, especially if Martha didn't care about where I was or what I was doing. Living two lives would get hard, and then just not work. It was on a quiet night when she shared about Brendan, her late husband's brother, and his clingy ways since Lewis was swallowed by the sea. It was clear she was scared of him. As she spoke of his mean acts and how he didn't want to leave her alone, anger bubbled up in me. She was scared for me too, telling me about Brendan's anger towards any man who got close to her. One day, as we walked to her office after eating, she nodded towards him, standing not too far off. He was a big guy, taller than me by a bit and much heavier, with both fat and muscle. His hair was a mess, and he had a smirk that she found scary. I wasn't scared, but Bridget stopped me from going up to him. That night, she held my hands and told me to be careful around Brendan because he had a nasty temper. I wanted to laugh it off, but seeing how serious and worried she was made me promise to keep away. Deep down, I knew Brendan would start trouble. This was one of the times I wished I was back in Chicago, where I had friends who could handle someone like Brendan if he got too threatening. Those shy pecks on the cheek soon turned into tight hugs and a goodnight kiss at the doorstep, then into small kisses while sitting close. Nothing too fiery, but sitting by her, feeling her warmth as we watched storms come in from the Atlantic, was enough for now. We were both careful, but it felt right to move slow. Midweek and Christmas week, I was alone because Bridget and Ellie went shopping with Caitlin in Cork. It looked like rain, and I was glad Patrick and his team fixed the roof so well, but I felt like I needed to get out. I thought about just making a sandwich, but ended up deciding to walk down to the Bullman. I put on my rain jacket and walked down the hill in the dark, guided by the lights of Summer Cove on the water, and the dim light from the moon showed me the way now and then. By that time, folks at the Bullman knew me, and I got a table near the fireplace in the bar. I chose the bar over the upstairs restaurant because I felt more at ease there without Bridget. I'd just finished their great seafood chowder and fresh bread and was sipping on a cup of tea. I was hoping to see Bridget later, so I didn't drink any beer. I saw Brendan come in. He wore a wet fisherman's parka. Until then, he had tried to scare me and Bridget from afar, but I knew we'd have to face off sooner or later. He didn't stop or nod at the barman as he walked over to me and bent down over me. He was drunk and reeked of beer and sweat. Plus, he looked really mean. "I'm only going to say this once. Stay away from Bridget. She's mine. We have a deal, so you don't need to be around," he said. He seemed a bit taken aback when I quickly stood up and we looked each other in the eye. "Mr. Brendan, where I'm from, we don't talk about our ladies in bars." I remembered that line from Robert Wayne in The Quiet Man and thought it fit. Besides, Miss Lorcan is a lady of honor and she would have told me if there was anything between you two, which makes me think you're not telling the truth and that you don't know how to act right. Brendan's face turned red with anger and he made fists with his hands. Right then, the bar guy grabbed his arm. "Stop it, Brendan. Out now." Brendan saw how big the bar guy was and, even with drinks in him, thought twice about a fight. As he got pushed to the door, he spun around. "This ain't over. She's mine and you'll be sorry." After he left, the room went quiet for a bit. Then folks went back to eating and drinking, but they kept looking over at me. A light flashed, then boom, thunder hit, just as Brendan made the air heavy. The rain started to pour. I waited a bit, thinking Brendan would try to jump me. I put on my coat and was about to leave when the bar guy said, "Be careful." I nodded and went out. And careful I planned to be. Halfway up the hill to my house, there's a spot where you can't see much from either side. I knew he'd be there, in the rain, waiting. Good thing I hadn't had much to drink. My hood was down and my hair got wet, but I needed to listen for him. When I reached the spot, I thought he'd be nothing. I was a bit let down, but stayed sharp. That's when he burst out of the dark, yelling mad, "I'll kill you, you rat!" I was ready, dodged his rush and tripped him. He fell hard on the rocks. Oomph! And I heard metal slide off into the night. So whatever he had, maybe a metal stick, he didn't have it anymore. That made things a bit fairer. I didn't let him get up. He had size on me and could end me despite my boxing practice this past year. He was trying to get up when I hit him hard in the back and sides. With each hit, he made a sound. He swung his big arm and caught me on my leg. Ouch, that hurt. I stepped back in as he tried to stand and hit him lots in his belly. He stood up, even drunk. I knew it had to hurt. I punched hard, all my anger coming out. I didn't hit his head to avoid hurting my hand, aiming for his body instead. He ran at me again, yelling like a wild dog. I moved aside, helped by the dark, and kicked him as he passed, making him fall. I was on him again, punching nonstop. He got on his knees again, but then I hit him right in the spot below his ribs. He fell, curled up, trying to breathe. I could have ended him then. Maybe I already hurt him inside bad enough, but I didn't think so. He was strong. I knelt next to him on the wet ground, panting. His mouth was open, his breath bad. The storm had stopped during our fight. Under the moon's light, I saw fear in his eyes as I told him, "Brendan, this is what you'll do. Take your boat. Leave Kinsale. If you mess with me or Bridget again, I'll make sure you suffer a lot, and then you'll end up deep in the sea tied to an anchor, just like your brother Lewis. Right then, I saw it in the weak moonlight. Not just fear of me or dying. I felt a chill knowing it and said, "You did it, didn't you? He couldn't look at me. You killed Lewis in the sea, didn't you? You wanted Bridget to yourself." His face showed he was guilty. "Brendan, you better run far, but you can't hide from the bad in you. It's taken over, and the devil's waiting to drag you to hell." I got up, my heart racing. Then I did something I didn't know I could. I spat at him. My spit hit his face, and he blinked. Brendan groaned, got on his hands and knees, and threw up. He wasn't a danger now. I walked away, hearing him throw up on the wet, rocky ground of Ireland. I couldn't sleep much that night. A couple of headache pills didn't stop my leg from hurting. Even drunk, Brendan could hit hard. Thank goodness he only hit me once. I kept thinking about the fight, and the bad fact that he had killed Bridget's husband kept bothering me. I didn't know what to do with that fact. I for sure couldn't tell Bridget. In fact, there was no way to tell anyone how I knew anyway, and I sure didn't want to tell the cops. George Grayson had to stay hidden. That was another problem. As I lay there, I thought about the last few weeks and all the work that went into making it look like I had vanished. And for what? It seems Martha didn't care or just thought I didn't mean to leave her. I pictured a scene where I came home after being away for weeks, and there would be Martha, phone in hand, rushing out saying, "Oh, there you are, George. Sorry, no dinner from me. Maybe Isabella can make you something. Gotta go, bye." She'd kiss me quick on the cheek as she passed, looking pretty and smelling good. Yes, it was almost funny. I had tried to say something big about our marriage and her being unfaithful, and what did it get me? My wife ignoring that I was gone and wanting to leave her, and my girls were sad because their dad wouldn't be there for Christmas with them. I made a big mistake. My job wouldn't leave me alone, even in Ireland. That was on me. Why didn't I just let the younger ones at work handle it? Was my fuss for nothing? Then I thought of Bridget. Nope, meeting her made everything better. Was it true? Yes, I was sure. She was pretty, smart, and had a great kid, and I liked her a lot. How much? Was I just an older guy trying to feel young again after my marriage went bad? Or was it a quick swap? I had so many questions. And what about Bridget's feelings for me? I thought I knew, but it wasn't clear. She knew I was running from a rough marriage. That should have made her careful. I was 12 years older. Was that too much? I had more money and she knew it. Was she just acting shy to catch me? I hoped not, but late at night with the rain, it was tough to keep my thoughts in line. At last, I used my skills from court to calm myself. The good news was I was in a cozy cottage in Ireland with a lovely woman who liked me. Nobody knew where I was. I could just get rid of my phone, turn off my computer, and start fresh. If Martha didn't agree to the divorce, it'd go through anyway. But two big problems stuck with me. I was living a lie, and I hated hiding the truth from Bridget. And the more I kept it up, the harder it would be to fix. Also, I missed my girls. I couldn't stand losing them. These troubles were still on my mind when I fell asleep. My phone rang and woke me up. It was Tony Preston, and it was 5 in the morning. Quick math told me it was 9 at night back in Chicago. "Tony, don't you ever sleep?" "No. If I do that, I can't ask you for more money," he laughed. "So, where are you now?" he asked. "Oh, just out here on the West Coast, enjoying the sun and watching pretty girls play beach volley while you're cold in Chicago." I made up. "Sounds great. Wish I was there." "Then how would you make all that cash from me?" "I'd still make you pay, but at least I'd be warm." "So, Tony, is this call just to make my bill higher, or what's up?" "Just wanted to let you know that Robert Fisher got caught by the feds this afternoon. They're after him for cleaning dirty money, being in a crime group, and other bad stuff. Our old buddy Barry Darren is stepping away from his politics to lead the charge himself." He laughed. "Barry made sure it got on the news at night." "Not sad about it." "Yeah, I get it, but they caught Brian Douglas too." "Really? Robert's bad news, but Brian caught me off guard." "Looks like they were both in deep, so it's going to be a mess for their company. Barry said they got a tip, started digging, and had to act fast to stop more bad stuff. You don't know anything about this, do you?" "Nope. I'm just here in California, chilling, happy in my retirement, and far from Martha." "Heard from her lawyer?" "Nothing, and can't find who's helping her. It's weird. The guy who gave her the papers said she was too calm and called it a mistake. Well, if she doesn't reply in 30 days, I'll push for a win by default. That's still cool with you? I want it that way and not going to change. Sure, George, just wanted to know. Hey, you not planning to fly out of here, right? I felt cold. No, why? Barry and his team will chat with everyone here, the big shots and top folks. All our money stuff is called for and they'll check it all close. If you think they might find something, I know the best guy to help. I think I'm okay, Tony. I'm clean and hey, they just made me senior partner. Since I was the one who tipped off Barry, I felt safe. Yeah, thought so. I've known you since we both got hits from Sister Beverly back in school. I'd be sad to learn you were mixed up in this mess. Thanks. And what mess you talking about, do you know or just thinking? Heard that Robert and Brian were sneaking money with the mob, even in their own pockets. Wow, that's dumb. They were already rich, Tony said, and the feds found over 25 million cash in a place. That's a win for Barry for sure. He laughed. Guess they thought they'd never be caught. Who do you think ratted them out? Good point, Tony. Someone got mad, no question, I said, knowing it was me. Gotta go. Happy hour and beach volleyball waits. Just remember, George, stay in touch and no leaving. I've got all I need here in sunny California. It seemed messing with Robert Fisher worked out just as I hoped. The mob guys would be mad a lot of their cash was now locked up by the feds. I wondered where they kept all that money. That made me think about the $5 million I got from Rodney Spencer. Was it from Robert or his bosses? I thought it was Robert's cut since $5 million was small compared to the whole, which was likely in the hundreds of millions. I hoped he was taking a bit on the side, but either way, he wasn't getting it back. What would I do with it? I hadn't decided yet. So far, I hadn't used it. If anyone checked my money, they'd only see my own spending, even if my cash was hidden away and in places like Madrid. A bad thought hit me. What if Robert dragged Martha into this mess? It would be just like him. I hoped not. I didn't think Martha was foolish enough to get mixed up in something dirty. And even with her stepping out on me, I didn't want her to meet a bad end by someone's hired hand. So what to do about her? Just letting it go seemed the best choice, but that might not make her see the truth. What was she up to? Sure, we drifted apart as our jobs got busy, but I still loved her. Despite all chances, I stayed true. That's what being married means, sticking to those big promises. With a heavy heart, I thought it might be time to face her and show her some photos. Then I slept again for 3 hours, feeling somewhat calm since I had a rough plan. It was 2 days before Christmas. When I got out of bed again that day and started my coffee, I checked my emails, loads from work, sharing news and gossip. I got rid of most of them. A few praised me for my good timing as usual. That made me smile. Early that day, Bridget had headed to her office, and I knew Ellie wasn't at school. After cleaning up, I walked into Kinsale, passing where I had fought with Brendan last night. The rain was gone, and the sun was out, making the day feel warm for winter. Nothing looked wrong where the fight happened. I was glad. And I was happy I hadn't killed him. He might have deserved it, but I didn't think it was my place to decide that then. When I got to Bridget's office, she smiled and waved me over while she was on the phone. Her green eyes shone. My heart felt warm. Ellie was drawing at a small desk. She smiled too. Today, Bridget wore a white sweater and a gold pin shaped like a Christmas tree. Her hair looked nice around her face. That's all I could see from where I was. She was so pretty. She ended her call, typed something on her computer, and then asked, "How was your night? It was late when we got back. I hope to see some light at your place." She seemed a bit worried. I walked up to her and took her hands as she stood. She had on a dark skirt and heels. She looked great as always. "Bridget, I missed you, but for some reason I was super tired last night. And then I couldn't sleep well until after 5 this morning. Sorry." She looked worried again and touched my face. Her hand was cool and soft. I wanted to kiss it. "George, are you okay?" She tried to pull back, but I kept her hand there. Never better, never better. When I let go, she blushed. She was so pretty. "Want to go for lunch?" I asked, feeling normal again. Bridget nodded, and I helped her with her coat. She smelled amazing. The 3 of us went down to the port to a fish place known for good food. I saw Bridget glance around. She tried to hide it, but I knew she was on the lookout for Brendan. He was nowhere to be seen. I hoped he'd taken my advice and left town. Over our meal, she shared tales of her day out shopping in Cork with her sister. Caitlin's husband had watched the kids, and Bridget and Caitlin had a blast. I liked hearing about her day out with her sister. It made me think back. I couldn't recall the last time I had a meal chat with Martha, or any talk that wasn't about some fancy event she went to or helped with among the rich folks in Chicago. With our girls not around, there didn't seem much else to chat about except work. And I'm sure she wasn't keen on sharing her fun times with Robert Fisher with me. Ellie was buzzing about her role in the school's Christmas show. "Will you come, Mr. Grayson?" she asked. I looked at Bridget and she gave a smile that said yes. "Ellie, I'd be glad to. Thanks for asking." After we ate, we walked back into town, Bridget's arm in mine. We looked at shop windows and I made a mental note of things she liked. As usual, I got a warm hug and a quick kiss at her office as we said bye. I left with a smile. The rest of my day was spent shopping and exploring the town. I ended up in front of a big gray church. The sign said, St. Robert the Baptist. It had been ages since I'd set foot in a church, not since my mom's funeral 20 years ago. She had passed away from cancer when I was 25. It had been hard on us, especially my dad, who only lasted another 5 years. I knew my 3 sisters were still going to church, and I hadn't really kept in touch. They'd be expecting me this year, too, for the big family dinner and football game. Martha often skipped. Too wild for her, she mentioned. My big brother was far away in Singapore, and my youngest, Scott, was a Marine in Afghanistan. I went up the steps, half thinking the doors would be shut. But this was Ireland. They opened easy, and I walked into the quiet church, light from the winter sun shining through colored glass windows. I sat in a back pew. It was so quiet. I let out a sigh, looking at the front, and felt an old feeling come back. Why did I stop coming? It had been so long I couldn't remember. Martha wasn't much for church. She liked work and money more, but that's not totally fair to say. Martha was great as a mom and had been a great wife for many years. When did we drift apart? I'm not sure how long I was there, deep in thought, until an older man, maybe in his 60s, tall and skinny, in dark pants and shirt with a church collar, came from the side. It was only when he stood by the speech stand, looking at notes maybe for his Christmas talk, that he seemed to see me. I went back to thinking, then heard his steps, and looked up. "Welcome," he said with a clear Irish sound standing near me. Then he seemed to know me and said, "So you're Bridget's Canadian?" I wasn't shocked he knew me. It's a small place and not a busy time, though how he said it made me think. Did he mean Bridget was just someone I rent from, or did she say more to him? Or was it just known in the town that we were getting close? I just nodded. Even though I hadn't followed the church in years, I didn't want to fib to a priest. Up close, he did seem in his 60s, with a wise and kind look. I was pretty sure he had heard it all in his time as a priest. He looked at me like he could see right through me. "What's bothering you, my son?" So, for the first time in 25 years, I spilled my guts to a priest sitting next to me in that beautiful church. When I finished, he just stared out the window at the dimming sky, then looked back at me and said, "You're George Randall from Chicago, not George Grayson from Canada, right?" I nodded. "George, it sounds like you're finally on the right path with the plans you've shared. I'm relieved you haven't messed up with Bridget. I've known her forever and she's precious. Life's been tough on her. She deserves happiness and you can give that to her. But she's also fragile and you could really hurt her. You've got to be honest with her. Your reason for pretending to be someone else is a bit twisted, but I think she'll get it." He paused, staring at me. "Now think. What are you really running from?" I thought of several quick answers, but I took my time. "Well, Father, I wanted to escape my wife. Her cheating cut deeper than anything else ever has." He stayed quiet. "And I had to get away from my job. Not just because my boss betrayed me and everyone at work knew it, but because I was exhausted, burned out after 20 years of non-stop stress. Martha cheating and my job promotion just broke me. I couldn't stand to be around any of them or face another day in my office or in court. I was finished." "When did you and your wife last go on a holiday, just the two of you?" he asked. I looked at him. "I can't remember." "So with both of your jobs, you lost track of who should matter most, each other?" I nodded with a heavy heart. "And somehow you got used to thinking work was everything?" "Yes." "You forgot that keeping a marriage good takes work every day?" "Yes, but she..." "Betrayed you?" "Yes, she did. I'm not saying it's okay what she did. But when a marriage ends, there are always two sides. Often we stop seeing what matters most. I just stared at him. Do you still love her, George? I do, I think. If I didn't, I wouldn't feel so bad. Can you forgive her? Think before you answer. You need to forgive to move past this, whether you stay with her or not. But you don't have to forgive right away. You're mad and sad and feel lost without your partner of 25 years. Plus, your pride is hurt. That stings a lot, especially since she was with someone you look down on. Doubting yourself will only make things worse. Father Andrew was right, even though I didn't want to admit it. I was stuck in self-pity, and it was affecting those around me. Life was rough. Now, about your wife. The church doesn't like divorce. You didn't marry in the church, but you should still talk to her. You know you should. She's been making decisions, but now she needs to know how much she hurt you. Maybe she hasn't talked because she doesn't care, or maybe she's just in shock. You left her after all. She needs to face what she's done to your marriage. His words made sense, even though part of me wanted to ignore them. I knew I had to listen to his advice. If you choose to divorce, then you and Bridget have big choices ahead. She's been super happy these last few weeks. I trust you'll keep it real with her. As for your job, you do need a break. And if you can't see yourself going back to your old job, then it's time to look for something new. George, from what I've heard about you since you got here, you're a doer. And from what you've shared, you view yourself as a hero for the little guy in Chicago. He said this with a smile. You seem to love standing up for those who can't do it themselves. You're too young to just hide away in Kinsale. Think on that. He paused, then added, Brendan is a mean guy, and he might deserve a tough lesson, though I'm not one for violence. But the way you talked about your fight with him seems right. You think he did something really bad to his brother, and I believe you, seeing he's a guy who can do really bad stuff. I hope he decides to tell the cops the truth. Father Andrew told me I was forgiven, plus gave me lots to think about. I felt a lot better, maybe because he helped me see things clearer. I spent the next hour making calls. My brain was still racing as I walked up to my cottage. Seeing a police car there puzzled me. When I got close, the two officers, a man and a woman, were just leaving my door. Mr. Grayson? Yes. The big guy, maybe in his 40s and wearing a suit, said, I'm Inspector Cillian, and this is Sergeant Dara, nodding at the smaller, dark-haired woman in uniform next to him. They didn't try to shake hands. What's this about, Inspector? His face was red, and his nose looked like it had seen a few fights, kind of like some cops I've seen back in Chicago, especially the older Irish ones. Can we talk inside? My heart was pounding as I tried to stay calm. Was I caught? Surely Father Andrew hadn't ratted me out. I was confused. When we got to my place, they didn't take my offer to sit down. Inspector Cillian shook his head. Mr. Grayson, when did you last see Mr. Brendan? I was so glad this wasn't about my fake passport and being in Ireland, I almost dropped my cool look. Keep it together, you've dealt with worse cops in courts before, I thought. Just last night around 8, I think, he came at me at Bullman's. He was drunk and mad at me. They weren't writing anything down, so I guess they already knew about it from Bullman's. What then? I left the bar about 15 minutes later and walked home in the heavy rain. And you didn't see him? No, I thought maybe I would, but he was so drunk I thought maybe he just found a place to sleep it off. They kept looking at me, waiting. I've seen Chicago cops do this to get a person to talk more. I stayed quiet. Then I asked, Did something happen to him? They looked at each other. Then the inspector said, Mr. Brendan planned to go fishing with some guys this morning, but no one has seen him. His boat is in the bay and his car is still in town. No sign of him. His house? I asked. They looked at each other again. He lives on the boat and his small boat is still at the dock. Oh, maybe he's still out somewhere, sleeping. He was very drunk. Inspector Cillian left his card on my counter. If you see Mr. Brendan, please call us. They left without another word. While we talked, I noticed the sergeant looking around and at my hands. Good thing I didn't have to explain the big bruise on my leg. So Brendan was missing. He wouldn't leave without his boat or car. He was likely sleeping off his bad deeds somewhere, but deep down, I hoped he'd vanish for good. He was a bad man, could even kill, and was a danger to me and my loved ones. My warning to him was serious, and if he came back, I'd have to act. That night I went with Bridget to Ellie's school for the yearly Christmas show. Some folks looked confused, but many had seen me in town or dealt with me since I arrived in Kinsale, like Callum Patrick, who fixed the roof of my cottage. After the show, I carried a sleepy Ellie up the hill and we tucked her into bed. As we stood by her bed, Bridget hugged me from the side and rested her head on my shoulder. We then sat down in the living room close to each other on her sofa. I wrapped my arm around her. Finally, she looked up and needed to know something. I gave her a light kiss. Does that answer your question? She cuddled closer. You're really leaving your wife? I looked at her and explained, Oh, I get it. Many married men might say that to trick younger women. But Bridget, that's not me. She was unfaithful with one of my business friends. I can't overlook that. It's not just silly male pride. I'm deeply hurt. I could never trust her again. Trust means a lot to me. You get that? She nodded, tears in her eyes. I didn't want to, but I had to be honest about more. Would Bridget dislike me for hiding things? Time would tell. I held her hands. There's more to it. She looked surprised. So I shared about being George Randall from Chicago, a lawyer and a partner in a big firm, and how I crafted a complicated plan to leave my wife and life in Chicago. The next time I told it, it sounded sillier. When I left, Bridget was crying. The next day, I woke up feeling bad because I didn't sleep well. I came to Ireland to relax and sleep, but no luck. My plans to live quietly were ruined now. I wanted to be a loner named George Grayson, but then I fell in love with a pretty Irish girl. Oh no, it was starting to rain when I went for a run very early. I ran hard, trying to leave behind Martha, my work, and the mess from both lying and telling the truth to Bridget. I wondered why I even went to that church. My mom used to say, if you want to see if God laughs, tell him your plans. She knew a lot. When I got back, the wind was stronger, bringing a big storm from the sea. I was soaking wet. Inside, I was shocked to see Bridget sleeping in my chair, covered with a warm blanket. She looked peaceful. I tiptoed by her to the bathroom to take off my wet clothes and shower. Her being there made me think, why? The hot shower was nice. I didn't want to leave it, but I was wondering, or more like worried, about what Bridget would say. Maybe she was here to say she never wanted to see me again because I lied, and she couldn't take that. I didn't shave. My hands were too shaky. I put on a thick robe and peeked at her from the hallway. She was still sleeping, so I got dressed in jeans, a warm sweater, and slippers. I walked back, getting ready for what was next. But she wasn't in the chair anymore. Did she get scared and run away? When I walked into the living room, I saw her in the kitchen. She was making tea and getting things ready for a snack. The toaster was on. Maybe tea and scones? I hoped this was good. I saw Bridget, and before I could talk, she ran to me and hugged me tight. We were quiet for a bit. Then she stepped back, tears on her face. "Oh, George, George, please stay with me. Don't go," she cried and hugged me again. "I'm sorry I lied," I told her softly. "I had to tell you. I hoped you'd understand. I was dumb." She looked at me, her sad eyes making me melt. I said, "I love you, Bridget." I really did love her. Her eyes got happier and she hugged me hard. "I love you so much, George. It hurts when we're not together." We kissed. If it wasn't for the tea kettle singing, we might not have stopped. Bridget wiped her tears and got the tea and scones ready. I stayed close and helped her bring it to the table by the fire. We sat close on the couch. She looked a bit sad when I said I had to go back to Chicago, but understood I needed to see my family and daughters for Christmas, and that I had to see Martha. She looked strong as I said I'd be back in a week. She surprised me by asking, "George, will you come to Mass with me tonight? It's the midnight service for Christmas Eve." I smiled, nodded, and stayed close, thinking of a future with a woman who really cared about me. The late-night service was full, and the church had all the bright and happy signs of Jesus' birth. Ellie had a short sleep before, so she was not tired. Bridget, as pretty as ever, wore a dark wool skirt, a red silk top, and black boots, standing close by, holding my hand. Ellie was next to her, and next to Ellie was Caitlin and her bunch. Her man, Shane, seemed real kind. Outside the church, Caitlin gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I thought about what Bridget might have told her. I left a big gift in the money plate. Father Andrew had just said what was clear, but I needed to hear it. Bridget squeezed my hand as we heard the start of the Christmas story from Luke in the Bible. And it came to pass in those days, there went out a rule from Caesar Augustus that all the land should be counted. After the service, we said hi to Father Andrew at the church door. Both ladies looked shocked as he shook my hand and said, "There you are, George. I saw you with these angels." He nodded at Caitlin and Bridget and patted Ellie's head as she slept in my arms. "You are a lucky guy." I looked at him for a second and said, "Yes, Father, I am, and thanks." He nodded and said, "I hope to see you at Mass in the days to come." Bridget seemed puzzled as I replied, "As long as I'm with these angels, I'll be here." We both laughed. "So you know Father Andrew too?" Bridget asked as we walked to the car. She held the umbrella while I carried Ellie. "Sure, Kinsale's not that big, you know," I joked. Bridget just smiled and shook her head. As the rain fell, we drove the rental car back to Summer Cove. After we got Ellie to bed, Bridget and I gave each other gifts on that early Christmas morning. I gave her a gold heart on a chain as a sign of my love. Her eyes shone as I put it around her neck. She gave me an old silver watch that was once her dad's and granddad's. It had her pick inside. The watch was old but lovely, used by men who had cared for Bridget a lot. I was so moved by this. "Thanks, Bridget, it's lovely. I'll keep it safe." Soon it was time for me to leave. We hugged for a long while. "Good night, Bridget, my dear. I'll see you in a few days. Happy Christmas. I love you." With tears, she said, "Happy Christmas, George. Please be safe. I love you. I'll pray every day you're safe and come back." She walked me to the car, not minding the rain. "Be safe, my love, and come back to me," she said, kissing me once more. I drove off, leaving the house near Summer Cove to head to Dublin for a Christmas Day flight to Chicago. I'd make it to my Chicago place by the lake, with time to spare for Christmas with my kids. Friends had set up a tree and decks, which was kind, and the kids and I would have time for the Randall family dinner and football fun. Thinking of Bridget with my 3 sisters and their kids made me smile. I had a ticket back, and for the first time in ages, I felt calm inside. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.